Back in the old days, long before skyscrapers and smartphones, this part of the world was the heart of everything. The greatest inventions that shaped human civilization, the compass, printing, paper, and gunpowder, all came from one place. This was China, the Middle Kingdom. Together with its neighbor India, it formed the economic and cultural center of the world. For centuries, China's dynasties led vast expeditions across oceans, traded silks and spices, and set the pace for the global economy. But around the 1800s, something began to change. Across the oceans in Europe and the United States, a spark was catching fire. It started with science, then machines, then entire revolutions in how humans worked, lived, and fought. The Industrial Revolution, trains, factories, steel, cities, airplanes, bombs, and eventually entire empires. The Western nations began to expand, taking over massive parts of the world map. Meanwhile, China remained a proud civilization, but one that found itself unprepared for the firepower of the industrialized West. British ships arrived armed with cannons, and when the smoke cleared, China had lost land. Hong Kong became a British colony. The Industrial Revolution that transformed the West never really took root in China, and by the mid-1800s, the once mighty empire began to decline. A century later, things grew even worse. Japan invaded, and the proud Middle Kingdom became a shadow of its former self, occupied, impoverished, and humiliated. After World War II, the global balance of power was reset. The West rebuilt its nations under a new economic system, capitalism, with free enterprise, but also some government oversight and taxes on the wealthy. And for many, it worked like magic. Germany, France, and Japan rose from the ashes. The Western world experienced a golden age of growth. Economists celebrated it as a miracle. Capitalism was creating prosperity at a pace the world had never seen. Some thinkers began to argue that if a little capitalism worked, then maybe more would work even better. Among them was a man named Milton Friedman, a brilliant and controversial economist from Chicago. Friedman had a simple but powerful idea: the only social responsibility of a business is to increase its profits. Companies, he argued, should focus solely on making money for their shareholders because that would eventually benefit everyone. For a while, it seemed he was right. The economies of the United States and other Western nations boomed. People were getting richer, industries were expanding, and life seemed good. But what about China? While the West was thriving under this capitalist boom, China had taken a very different path. After years of internal conflict and revolution, the country was led by Mao Zedong, who built a communist system under one-party rule. The idea of private business or capitalism was crushed. The result? By the 1970s, China was poor, isolated, and broken. Famines and failed policies had left millions struggling to survive. The once mighty empire that had led the world was now one of its poorest nations. And then came a man who would change everything: Deng Xiaoping. When Deng took power in the late 1970s, he looked around and saw China's neighbors, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, thriving under capitalist economies. Millions were being lifted out of poverty across Asia, while China remained stuck. During a visit to Singapore, Deng witnessed something that transformed his thinking. He saw ethnic Chinese people living under a capitalist system, running successful businesses, building skyscrapers, living well. He realized something crucial: China's problem wasn't its people, it was its system. So Deng made a bold move. He decided to experiment with capitalism, but carefully. He couldn't risk losing political control, so he introduced a compromise system he called socialism with Chinese characteristics. It started with one small fishing village near Hong Kong called Shenzhen. Deng declared it a special economic zone, a place where foreign companies could invest and operate freely, guided by market forces. What happened next is one of the most extraordinary economic miracles in human history. In just a few decades, Shenzhen transformed from a sleepy town of a few thousand people into a megacity of more than 10 million. Fields and rice paddies were replaced by factories, offices, and skyscrapers. People who once earned $1 a day were now making tens of thousands a year. The success was so overwhelming that China replicated it all over the country, opening more special zones, inviting foreign investment, and building a manufacturing empire. Foreign companies poured in to take advantage of China's cheap labor. They built products for the entire world: phones, clothes, cars, electronics. Made in China became the label on everything. The country went from an agrarian society to the world's factory, pulling hundreds of millions out of poverty. Within decades, China became the second largest economy on Earth. By now, you can probably guess what's coming. If you're fascinated by how China pulled this off, you're definitely going to want to hit that subscribe button, because we dive deep into the stories behind global power shifts like this every week. Okay, so China's rise sounds like a beautiful story of capitalism working wonders. But there's another side to it, a story told not in words, but in data. Imagine a graph shaped like an elephant. Economists actually call it the elephant graph. On one side, you have the poorest people in the world. On the other, the richest. Now, if you plot how everyone's income grew over the last 35 years, the same period that globalization and China's rise exploded, do lines see something fascinating. The poorest 10% of people in the world saw their incomes rise by about 75%. The global middle, especially people in China, India, and other developing countries, saw their incomes skyrocket by more than 125%. These are the new middle classes of Asia, the direct beneficiaries of globalization. But if you move to the middle income percentiles, something odd happens: the growth flattens. The working and middle classes of the West, the people in Detroit, the factory workers in Ohio, the industrial laborers across Europe, barely saw their incomes grow at all. In some cases, they even declined. Their jobs had moved overseas, many to China. Then, as you reach the very top of the income ladder, the wealthiest 1%, the graph suddenly shoots up again. Their income tripled. These are the billionaires, CEOs, and investors who benefited the most from shareholder capitalism and the global shift of production. This is why the graph looks like an elephant, rising at the start, dipping in the middle, and then curving up again at the end. It shows us who the winners and losers of globalization really are. The rise of China lifted millions out of poverty, yes, but it also concentrated wealth among the global elite, while hollowing out parts of the Western middle class. And then there's another graph. This one doesn't show income, it shows carbon, CO emissions. On it, one line towers above all others: China. The same industrial boom that transformed its economy also made it the largest emitter of greenhouse gases on the planet. The West industrialized earlier, but China's speed and scale have pushed the global climate into crisis. We all know the story: rising temperatures, melting ice caps, floods, fires. It's become the background noise of our century. And yet, the connection is direct to our global economic system, built on shareholder capitalism and endless growth, is now threatening the very planet we live on. It's easy to feel numb to it, right? Like the crisis is too big, too abstract, too far away, but it's already here. Our world is changing, and the only question left is how much worse we're going to let it get. So what does all of this mean? It means that the story of China's rise isn't just about factories, GDP charts, or trade wars. It's a mirror. It shows us what capitalism can achieve and what it can destroy when profit becomes the only goal. But here's the hopeful part. There's a new idea spreading among economists, business leaders, and thinkers around the world. It's not socialism. It's not communism. It's a reimagined version of capitalism itself, something called stakeholder capitalism. Instead of focusing only on shareholders, the investors who own companies, this model says businesses should also consider everyone affected by what they do: employees, suppliers, customers, local communities, governments, and yes, the planet itself. It's not about ending capitalism, it's about upgrading it. Even massive corporations like Apple, Walmart, and Morgan have started signing on to this idea. The old model that Milton Friedman championed was perfect for creating wealth fast. But today, we're facing a world where speed and profit aren't enough. We need sustainability, equity, and accountability. Stakeholder capitalism, about asking one simple question: what is the purpose of business in the 21st century? To make a handful of people richer or to make life better for everyone involved? Because as China's story shows us, capitalism can be a tool for astonishing progress, but only if we control the direction it grows in. If left unchecked, it builds wealth at the top and pollution at the bottom. If guided wisely, it can lift humanity and protect the planet. So maybe the rise of China isn't just the story of one country's power, it's a lesson for all of us. That the systems we build determine the future we get. And maybe that's the real question we have to face now, not how China became so powerful, but how we use our own power from here. If you've made it this far, I want to hear what you think. Do you believe capitalism can evolve into something better, or are we chasing an impossible balance between profit and planet? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every one of them.